Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Camilla Carrara, Project Coordinator at C.L.A.S.S. I am really pleased to welcome you all today to the third session of C.L.A.S.S Smart Voices 2022 program, a transparent view on the fashion supply chain on the occasion of Fashion Revolution Week. Now, I'm extremely pleased to welcome our today's speakers. Giusy Bettoni, CEO and founder of C.L.A.S.S, Maria Teresa Pisani, Economic Affairs Officer and Project Lead of United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, Fulvia Bacchi, General Manager of UNIC, National Union of the Tanning Industry, CEO of Lineapelle and ICEC, Kerry Bannigan, Executive Director of Fashion Impact Fund and founder of Conscious Fashion Campaign, Simpliciano, Policy and Research Manager at Fashion Revolution. Enjoy your vision.
Thank you, Camilla, for the introduction and a warm welcome to all these speakers. I'm really honored today to have these smart voice dedicated to transparency and in a very special moment that C.L.A.S.S is supporting Fashion Revolution Week. And 2022 see the 9th anniversary of Rana Plaza collapse. Do not want to go into this anniversary, what happened, because everybody knows it, but I would like once more, because that's also our 9th moment in our history, where we use this as a motivator to do something concrete in order to change things. And that's why we are dedicating, our class efforts for, this special week to the value of transparency that sees a huge importance now more than ever. But I will take really 2 minutes just to share with you what transparency means. There are different kind of value behind it, and I took it from different, inputs. And before, sharing what our honored guest has to say about it, I would like to tell you that, for example, in fashion transparency is the practice of openly sharing information about how, where, and by whom a product was made. Being transparent means publishing all information about every actor involved in the production process, from start to finish, from the fields to the store shelves. It allows customers to know exactly what they are buying with details from every step of the production process, knowing also the impacts about them. But I would like also to say, to share with you a KPMG study that has been conducted in August 2021, just before the COP26, a joint study about sustainability, traceability, and transparency that they conducted over 200 senior executives around the globe, representing brands and retailers, suppliers, manufacturers, and sourcing agents. And the results were quite eye-opening. 2/3 of the respondents through transparency, transparency was extremely important. Only 20% had the full overview of every party in their supply chain. 15% having full traceability. I'm not commenting, because I think, the numbers and the answer are telling. And in terms of consumer, we think that transparency has everybody interest. Radical transparency is trending. What does it mean? McKinsey and Business of Fashion report that 52% of millennials always research background information before buying. Being transparent is a tool for storytelling about story making. So the alignment is there, which in turn helps brand build and regain trust with their audience. It should be a win-win. But on top of this, we have also, March 2022, Brussels European Commission released its long-awaited strategy for sustainable textile, and this strategy is part of a broader package, where one of the key things that C.L.A.S.S is really pushing since the beginning, that it talks about, the passport, the digital passport, product passport. Is so important, to be able to tell a story that is true, simple, and dedicated. And still, European Commission, January 2021, with the national consumer authorities, released the result of a screening of website that has been carried out, to online markets. And I share with you two main findings that I think it's important. In more than half of the cases, the trader did not provide sufficient information for consumer to judge the claim accuracy. And in 59 of cases, the trader had not provided easily accessible, evidence to support his claim. So a lot to do, I think. Transparency allows shoppers to make better decisions. It also helps all brands accountable. By knowing exactly what a company is doing or what target it has set for itself, it's easier to keep track and demand more. Unions and civil society organizations cannot do their job to make sure that workers are in safe environment, that their rights are respected, and that the environment is protected if it's not clear where, how, and by whom clothes are produced. And by holding brands accountable, the whole industry is pushed to be and doing better. So, and we know that market research are saying that the contemporary consumer has been moving in the last 10 years, the industry not just accountability, but also the way to do things, and to do industry. So today is so important to, with our honored guests, to understand where we are, with the transparency and traceability, and which are the tools that can help getting there, because C.L.A.S.S more than ever would like to, push the change in order to be as concrete as possible and to give the opportunity to consumer to buy something, where they can be fully informed. So let's start this conversation. So welcome, Maria Teresa Pisani, Economic Affairs Officer and Project Lead of United Nations ICEC, so Economic Commission for Europe. Maria Teresa is Economic Policy Officer at the Economic Cooperation and Trade Division of the United Nations ICEC, where she leads the work on policy and standards for sustainable circular value chains, and is currently managing a globally multi-stakeholder initiative on sustainable garments and footwear. So a lot to do, I think, Maria Teresa, and can you share with us a little bit, the work at United Nations ICEC that you are implementing and activating transparency in the full supply chain? You have launched a special focus initiative that C.L.A.S.S has already subscribed to, because we think it's so important, this call to action needs to have a very important success. So you have launched it to the fashion supply chain toward transparency. Sustainable Pledge, that's the name. Can you share with the audience what is it about and how to participate as well? Welcome.
Thank you very much, Giusy, for the kind introduction. Thank you to Camilla, and thank you to C.L.A.S.S for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you all today, to join forces actually with the many actors around the table. And I see Fashion Revolution and ICEC UNIC that have been a partner in our initiative since the very start. So it's great to be here with colleagues actually. So about our initiative, I will put, I have prepared a few slides that I will put on screen with some, yes, I hope you can, yes, can you see it?
Yeah.
Great. So I will start basically with one consideration. I mean, at UNECE, at the Economic Commission for Europe of the United Nations, we actually agree that improving traceability and transparency of the value chains in this industry has become a priority. Has become a priority as it is a key enabler to advance sustainability and circularity. Why so? Because consumers, governments, civil society are increasingly demanding responsible business conduct and are increasingly calling upon the industry to identify and to address the impacts and risks for human rights, for the environment, and for human health that are so heavy in this industry. Giusy, you have been mentioning a few studies from KPMG, from McKinsey, the study just released recently from the European Commission and the EU Textile Strategy. They all confirm that. Now, Let's first of all agree on the definitions, because I mean, traceability and transparency are two concepts that are often used interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. Traceability, first of all, is what we define the process of tracking materials and products and the way, the conditions in which they were produced through the supply chain. It's about gaining visibility of what's happening along the value chain and where the impacts and risks for human rights, for workers, for the environment are happening, in order to devise the right measures to mitigate and address them, prevent, mitigate, and address them. Transparency is about disclosure. It's about making information available to allow common understanding and comparison. Of course, traceability is, let's say, the foundation. It's what you need to have in place in order to make disclosure and to go transparent. So while they are two well interconnected concepts, they are two distinct concepts, and that's important to flag. Now, I also want to flag out three main drivers for traceability and transparency as a backdrop in a particularly challenging sector for the transition to a sustainable, climate neutral, and circular production and consumption model. Now, first is consumers' increasing demand for sustainable products. And we have seen that millennials, particularly millennials, are paying increasing attention to the sustainability performance, circular performance of the products they buy. It's more than actually 60% of consumers that are ready to make more responsible choices. At the same time, it's clear that they do not yet trust information they get about the who, the where, and the how made their clothes. So there is certainly a trust issue in the claims that are put on products. Second is civil society, investors, regulators raising attention to the credibility of sustainability claims. Investors, impact investments in the industry has increased dramatically. That means that investors are paying attention to the sustainability credentials of the companies they invest in, but also regulators. There is an increasing body of policy and regulation in support of that. The EU, just at the end of February, has published a proposal of a directive that will make mandatory due diligence along the entire value chain. That means that companies will be made accountable for the sustainability performance, not only of their own operations, but also of their suppliers. And this is going to be really a key milestone, actually. And then recently, the publication of the EU textile strategy, because textile, garment, and footwear are going to be a key focus sector for the Green Deal and circular strategy of the whole European Union. Third aspect is that information to support responsible choices for consumers and businesses actually is available along the value chain. But the problem is that somehow it's segregated in silos that are not connected. It's coded in different way and does not flow. So that's why traceability and transparency have become key to make the connection among all the value chain actors, and of course involve coordinated work among all industry actors to scale up solutions that are now there available. Thereby, they can actually ensure that environment, human rights, social risks are effectively identified and addressed along the whole value chain, starting really from raw material production to manufacturing, to branding and retailing, consumption and post-consumption. Very important to cover also and consider the post-consumption phase. As we know, textile waste is a very important hotspot for the industry. Now, at UNECE, starting in 2019, we have set up a multi-stakeholder policy dialogue platform to engage experts and the whole industry ecosystem. We have actually now a network of more than 700 experts that have been participating and contributing to our initiative. Now, in terms of what it has been produced as part of this initiative that has been funded, is led by the UN, but is funded by the European Union. We have produced, first of all, policy recommendations that basically provide a set of concrete policy measures that government should put in place in order to help the industry take this journey and advance the traceability and transparency of the value chains. We have very detailed guidelines that provide information like a description of the key elements of a traceability and transparency approach, that describe and provide guidance on how to formulate claims, how to identify traceable assets, how to identify the data and the information that needs to be collected at key data points along the value chain in order to provide that verification that is necessary and that evidence that is necessary to support trust in sustainability claims. And then we have launched a call to action, the Sustainability Pledge, and I will talk about it in a moment, that is calling on all the key actors and stakeholders in the industry, governments, businesses, NGOs, academia, think tanks, business associations, consumers associations, to take commitments on specific actions that can support this effort. And we will see how the Sustainability Pledge, this call to action, is structured. We have also developed a technical tool that is in the information exchange standard. And here we have detailed business process analysis for both the leather and textile value chains, covering all the main fibers and materials. We have business requirement specifications, and these are more for, let's say, data analysts, for business analysts that operate in companies to develop the traceability system in the company. And then we have a set of guidelines and studies that provide a very comprehensive analysis of the policy, regulatory, legal framework at the global, regional, national level in support of traceability and transparency. All these documents have gone through an intergovernmental process, have been adopted, endorsed by our member states. It's 56 member states, so it's a formal UN intergovernmental process that has been leading to the production of these documents, and you will get access to them through the link that I will share at the end. Now, about the Sustainability Pledge and call to action. So as part of this UNECE framework initiative, we have launched the Sustainability Pledge. The Sustainability Pledge, as I said, invites all actors in the industry to take action for traceability and transparency, and establishing basically a mechanism for supporting the implementation of the measures proposed in the recommendation and in the guidelines. Now, this Sustainability Pledge is not only for governments, is also for brands, for companies, for service providers, for academia, for civil society, for organizations and platforms, NGOs, industry associations, because we believe that really no one can do this alone. This needs to engage and involve the whole ecosystem for this industry and the whole, let's say, ecosystem of actors for the industry. Everybody can actually play its role. Now, basically here, since the publication of the policy recommendation, we have received 56 pledges. More are coming in from various types of actors. Now, although the pledges are often involving a number of actors, so we have 200 partners that are there involved. now the total number of partners activated actually is 200, because actors can actually commit with a pledge with different partners. It is also possible for one organization that is participating as a partner in one pledge submit a single pledge. What is important in these actions that are submitted from actors, we ask partners to provide KPIs, key performance indicators, to monitor performance. We ask them to indicate specific activities, but then to indicate also these KPIs for us to monitor progress. For example, this can relate to the number of trace supply chain phases, the total number of suppliers or actors in the value chain that are involved, or the number of companies that are participating in the initiative. Now, what is the benefit of joining the Sustainability Pledge and participating in this initiative? First, we profile all the actors that submit a pledge on our website. We will produce a report and we provide related communication. We are going to make annual events that are dedicated to sharing of experiences and lessons learned and good practices based on the pledges submitted. This is really to offer a platform that can, at global level, give an opportunity to learn on where the industry stands on this, what is the progress, what are the challenges, what has been achieved, and what are the solutions out there that can be implemented and scaled up. Now we plan actually now to launch a community of practice. A community of practice whereby we will engage all the submitters of the pledge. We are very happy to have C.L.A.S.S as one of the partners, a new partner to the Sustainability Pledge, and the community of practice will be engaged in discussions in preparations of the annual meetings and the annual report.
And this is great, Maria Teresa. I know that there is much more, but this is just the beginning of sharing the values, the activities, because as C.L.A.S.S, we are, subscribing, but we take also the commitment to share more about this initiative, throughout the whole time. And thanks, Francesca Romana Rinaldi, that was sharing links during conversation. So we will be in touch, and thanks for highlighting this initiative that is going to be shared, with all our community, and we will be in touch soon again. And talking about transparency, we go to Fulvia Bacchi, welcome, General Manager of UNIC, that is the Association of Italian Tanneries, and CEO of Lineapelle and ICEC. Fulvia Bacchi has been General Manager of UNIC since 2016 and CEO of Lineapelle since July 2017. And she also CEO of ICEC, that is the Institute of Quality Certification for the Tanning Industry, and member of the board of the Italian Leather Institute of Naples. So Fulvia, a lot of things, a lot of activity, a lot of commitment, but also hard work, right, Fulvia?
Yes, it's your list is so.
It's your bio. So I was just reading because it's
too many work to do. Yes. No, Giusy, thank you for the opportunity you are giving me to talk about Italian leather industry. Because Italian leather industry is, in my opinion, the most clear example of transparency and traceability. But we have a bigger responsibility. We represent 65% of the European production and 23% of the global production around the world. We are leader, and it's not a way to say, but our client are the most important brand of fashion, automotive, design. So we have a bigger responsibility for them to avoid any risk in their process production. This is the reason why, as an association, but even as a sector, we every year, starting from 2002, and I want to underline this date because it's not a new matter for us, sustainability. We started more than 20 years ago to publish a sustainability report of our companies. And every year we give a clear and transparent view about our results. Tanning industry is a very complicated industry where, you know, we use a lot of water, a lot of chemical products, a lot of energy, but we are now able to demonstrate our commitment regarding the planet, and year after year, the result we obtain to reduce the use of this important aspect of our planet. And it is important even to talk about the origin of the raw material. It is something you know, but I want to repeat. Our raw material is something that comes from the food industry. We recuperate waste from the food industry, and we want to be very sure about the provenance, about the way the animal has been treated, and even that the origin of these raw materials are not coming from the area where deforestation is a problem. So these are all aspects that we keep in consideration, and we can give all the explanation about what we use in our industry. So this is an important matter, and for us, sustainability is something really important.
Thank you, Fulvia. Always to the point, short and very impactful, you know. But it's very important, I think, to remind people the work that has been done since 2002 in Italy, you know, and how the company, the industries, because we are not talking about boutique, but we are talking about industries, are really year by year, you know, sharing the impact, sharing, you know, all the values that we are looking for. So going back to the main subject, you know, how UNIC has been activating the Italian tannery industry transparency. I think you have done even a certification around it.
Yes, in fact, this is the second point. I can say 95% of our companies are certified, not only ICEC, but with many other institutions. And we actively work with many other organizations, like, for example, Worldwide Fund, and with many other organizations, always in mind to reach always best results for our industry. And for me, this is very important because I can say we cannot lose our leadership in the world. We are able to create a wonderful product, beauty, full of creativity, but as you always say, responsible. So
it's key, and I think it will be good maybe to put on the chat the link to the new sustainability report that you just issued, so that people can see the numbers and the facts you are referring to. You know, we will do
yes,
it.
I can send the link as you send the link of the research.
Exactly.
So the audience can understand better what I am saying.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Fulvia. And I don't know if you have something more special to share with us, or we leave the question and answer to the end, as you prefer, you know, because, okay. Thank you. And let's go to Kerry Bannigan. Welcome, Kerry. Executive Director of Fashion Impact Fund and founder of Conscious Fashion Campaign. You are a social entrepreneur pioneering global fashion and media initiative to advance the creative economy as a driving force for sustainable development. That talks a lot to us, you know, creativity, as Fulvia was saying, beautiful, but at the same time responsible, because that's a key. As the Executive Director of the Fashion Impact Fund, Kerry spearheads program and grants with business, governments, and United Nations agency to support women entrepreneurs, leading education initiative that accelerate the fashion industry transition to a sector that values people and planet. You know, and a lot, again, women really committed, multitasking, you know. So, but Kerry, what are Fashion Impact Fund and Conscious Fashion Campaign, and what do they represent? Can you share with us?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me here today. So I come from a different perspective, an area of the industry. So I'll start with the Fashion Impact Fund that supports women entrepreneurs that are leading educational initiatives that you had mentioned, where we can provide resources financially as well as media to amplify their work to accelerate the fashion industry's transition to a sector that values people and planet. And supply chain transparency plays a huge role in this. And how do we look to see that the people that are leading these programs, and so many of them are women-led, how can we ensure that we're harnessing the work that they're doing, and then all together ensuring that they have a seat at the table, people are aware of the work that's happening, and they have access to finances so that their programs, systems, and solutions can continue to help the fashion industry evolve to an equitable, inclusive, and regenerative fashion ecosystem. The Fashion Impact Fund operates under 3 pillars: knowledge, media, and skills. And you mentioned the Conscious Fashion Campaign. That's actually one of our flagship programs that sits under our media pillar. And our media pillar is very focused on content and campaigns that can amplify the representation of women entrepreneurs that are really driving change in the fashion industry. And so when we're looking at what our support and how we activate and the role that we play across transparency is how we want to help people be educated about this. We're seeing that it's such a complex and yet vague topic that comes up in the space. It's very confusing, and it's fantastic programs like what Maria is leading, where we can start getting people to pledge and share education, and also more so share casing in how this is being implemented. But these things come needing finances and resources. And more than anything that we're also finding is the amplification of people with these tools, because they're so busy, and you see this with your own work, you know, you're so busy making sure this is happening. You don't have huge marketing budgets. You don't have huge PR budgets sitting there. And what seems like it's superficial to be thinking about media placement, we need this placement to ensure that we can continue to disrupt the narrative of what is happening and how we can make these solutions mainstream and not just siloed within conversations with the change makers and the enablers. And so the Conscious Fashion Campaign is really spurred from the Global Media Monitoring Project. Their report for 2020 to 2021, it suggested that only 25% of news sources were women, and that just blows my mind. And then another stat shared that only 35% of sources in the news that are around advocacy and activism were women. Now, I don't know about everybody on this call, but when you look to think of people leading game-changing initiatives, not just in the fashion industry, but I'm going to speak to fashion, there's so many that are women-led. And so with our work, we want to ensure that we are amplifying that leadership and making sure they're being heard. The Conscious Fashion Campaign, as I'd mentioned, it's an initiative of the Fashion Impact Fund, and it's actually led in collaboration with the United Nations Office for Partnerships in New York and the Public Foundation. And it's all about spotlighting women entrepreneurs that are advancing fashion industry change on digital billboards. And so we do this during New York Fashion Week, where women will be showcased for their work, whether you're looking at how we can educate and inform and inspire this diverse media landscape and being much more inclusive to women entrepreneurs that are shaping this new era of the fashion industry. And in turn, they're actually shaping society with these innovative solutions. When people talk about sustainability and how do we drive change, and it's so overwhelming, and what do we do? I'd actually like to say that a majority of system solutions and strategies already exist. They are there. It's just how do we get them the resources to being able to scale the industry to drive change? And so for us, the Conscious Fashion campaign is really just an item where we can highlight those that are driving supply chain and what should be happening, how these honorees are showing you what can be done to look at how the sector can be better, and not just at one element of the supply chain, but how we can have transparency throughout the whole value chain, how as stakeholders we can all learn and be inspired, and how we all have a role to play in this. And my role now, where I sit in my career, I have been over 15 years of impact. It's had many different names, as many of us know in this space, and where it sits now. But right now, where I'm extremely focused is on how we can come together and really ensure we're amplifying women-led programs that are driving change, and how we all have a responsibility to drive Sustainable Development Goal 5 around gender equality. And what does that look like? And it is not to isolate programs, so it's just women doing things over here. It's to ensure that there's equal access to resources. And mainly for us, that is about finance and media amplification.
You couldn't say it better. You know, Kerry, I think you touch different arguments, all key, you know, and going back a little bit to transparency, that needs anyway to include all the other values, and women is, I think, is one of the priority. But at the same time, you touch communication, you know, amplifying, because, you know, we can see sometimes that there is an amplification of the problem, but not an amplification of the solution. I do not know why this happened. Maybe it's much more sensationalistic, you know, to give bad news. But I think now, even more than ever, we need to stay focused on how to solve the problem together, you know, and how to
driving that narrative. Yeah, and being able to disrupt the narrative so it's mainstream. And you touch a good point there. When we read in the media, it's problem-led versus solutions-led. And we need to change that. And we need to show how many of these advocates, these change makers, these innovative enablers, they're there. They're in society doing incredible work. We just need to ensure that we are amplifying that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the, let's say, problems that we need to face, that is a cultural one, is that, you know, we change so much the technology in order to be more sustainable. We change so much also the culture and the mind shift. But at the same time, we didn't change our way to communicate. It looked like we use an old tools and an old vocabulary to transmit not product, but values. That for me is something completely different. So I think one of the challenge, you know, when we say transparency, to me, I keep repeating that, you know, the storytelling without the story making, it's just greenwashing. But even when you have both of them, sometimes we see amazing company with a great story making where the storytelling is not reaching the final consumer because it's difficult, because, you know, it's not elaborated in order to help. So I think we have a huge responsibility in amplifying, but also I think in creating a new vocabulary, you know, a real one, you know, always, you know, with a third party verification. So I think really we touch another important point. Thank you very much, Kerry, and let's continue, you know, with Simpliciano, policy, sorry, did I say correctly? Because I'm reading like Italian, okay, and maybe it's not correct.
It is a very Italian last name, but I'm actually Filipino, but I don't know what happened back in the past, but I'm fine with that pronunciation, that's fine.
Well, no, please tell me how you pronounce it, because that's your name. So
well, I say Simpliciano, so there's a little less emphasis on the end, but okay, it's fine.
Welcome, Liv, and the Policy and Research Manager at Fashion Revolution. So early in her career, Liv worked with one of the world leading organizations to illuminate and remedy labor violation in supply chains, helping corporations, brands, and the government to understand the risk of forced labor and human trafficking across the supply chains. At Fashion Revolution, Liv is the policy and research manager and is responsible for managing the delivery of the Fashion Transparency Index that drive industry transformation and increase accountability. So, Liv, what is Fashion Revolution? We know we have been talking about it for at least the last 9 years, but what does it stand for? Can you share with us?
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction, and it's wonderful to be part of such an amazing panel of women. So I have some slides. So I guess I'm gonna go in. I've aligned my slides with the questions that you sent. So yeah, I'll just get into it. So what is Fashion Revolution? So we were created in 2014, understanding the immense need for transformative systemic change in the industry. I know that we're aware of the Rana Plaza tragedy, but it just really highlighted the need for change and the pressure that was being placed on suppliers and workers in the supply chain by the demand for fashion. So what is Fashion Revolution? We are a global movement of people who make the fashion industry work. We're a mix of designers, academics, writers, business leaders, retailers, marketers, producers, and fashion lovers, and so on. We are both part of industry, but we are also, citizens as well. We have teams in over 88 countries, an extensive social media presence, and a highly engaged community of people raising awareness and taking action to make positive change, both social and environmental change in the fashion industry. And we have a really unique position of working both within and outside of the industry. And I just want to take a moment to say we really have such an amazing community. Of course, it's Fashion Revolution Week, and it's just amazing to be part of such a global movement. And I just want to give a quick shout out to our network because I forget when it was, but a few months ago, our Instagram was flagged as like fraudulent or something. It was a false flag, but we lost our account. And of course, that's really important for us as a global campaign. But because of the quick action of our community, it was resolved in a few days. So it just really highlighted the power of our community. So we're really grateful for that. So moving on. So as Fashion Revolution, our vision and aim is to create a global fashion industry that conserves and restores the environment and values people over growth and profit. So we campaign for industry-wide culture of transparency and accountability across the value chain, where brands take responsibility for their social and environmental impacts, and where there's no time wasted trying to prove responsibility and chains of custody. So the way that we go about this is we have a three-pillared approach in our theory of change. So this cuts across policy change, industry change, and cultural change. And I'll just give a quick summary of examples of that. I'm sure many of you are aware of our Who Made My Clothes campaign, so I won't go too deeply into that. But of course, this was a way to demand greater transparency and bring people and make them feel more empowered to demand transparency and accountability and understand who made their clothes and under what conditions. So this was like a really transformative campaign, an example of how we advocate for cultural change. And it's been amazing to see the uptake of this campaign. We've had, over 800,000 hashtags on Instagram using this. And, we have brands and producers responding back saying, I made your clothes. And even today, I was walking to get my lunch and I walked by our local craft store and I saw these garments in the window and there was a Who Made My Clothes poster, but someone had took out the Who Made My part and put I restyle my clothes. And it was just really cool to see how people take our messaging around slowing down the fashion cycle and really make it their own. So it was really great to see that in my local store. Of course, another way we advocate for cultural change is our Fashion Revolution Week, which is of course happening now. So this is a really important lever of our work. And it's a time for our community to come together and create and advocate for a better fashion industry. So last year, our theme for Fashion Revolution Week was Rights, Relationships, and Revolution, which recognizes the human rights and rights of nature are interconnected and independent. But this year, our theme is Money, Fashion, and Power, as many of you are aware. But just to reiterate, it's no secret that the fashion industry relies upon exploitation of labor and natural resources. Wealth and power are concentrated in the hands of a few, and growth and profit are rewarded above all else. So this Fashion Revolution Week is a way of spreading the message that the majority of the people who make our clothes are not paid enough to meet their basic needs and already feel the impacts of the climate crisis. So this theme draws upon our first ever fanzine, which you can also find for free online. I can always share a copy of that in the chat after this if you don't have access to that. And there'll be more information at the end of this presentation for how you can get involved. Another lever of change is our policy advocacy. So we say that we have a unique position at Fashion Revolution as both working inside the industry and outside of the industry. So this is one way of working outside of the industry. So we advocate for policy changes and influence governments to play a more active role in enforcing and regulating the industry. So some examples of this are addressing European Parliament and the UK government to make a case for better regulation on corporate accountability, transparency, working conditions, and environmental practices. We also collaborated to help pass more stringent clauses within the UK and Australian Modern Slavery Acts, and also input on the human rights and environmental due diligence legislation in the EU. But most recently, we lobbied brands to sign the renewed Bangladesh Accord in collaboration with Clean Clothes Campaign and the Pay Up Coalition, as it was faced with a potential expiry despite the tremendous impact that it has had on the working conditions in Bangladesh and safety conditions in Bangladesh. So a way that we lobbied brands is we used our internal communications channels with our Fashion Transparency Index, which I'll explain next. But we used our relationship with brands to pressure 49 major brands to publicly commit to the renewed accord by saying that if they did not sign on to the new accord, they would lose points within the Fashion Transparency Index. And that proved to be a successful way to lobby brands to sign. I'm not saying that was the only reason that they signed, because I would hope that's not the only reason that they signed, but just to say that it's a way to, this is how we lobby brands and use our relationship with them through the FTI to get them to make important changes. And, as a result, I mean, not just Fashion Revolution's efforts, but just to say, of course, that new agreement was reached, and it's amazing that happened. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we work within the industry to advocate for industry change. So as I mentioned, our main way of doing that is the Fashion Transparency Index. And the Fashion Transparency Index is an annual review of 250 of the world's largest brands and retailers ranked according to their level of public disclosure on human rights and environmental policies, practices, and impacts in their own operations and supply chains. So this is a way to leverage brands' competitive tendencies to get a sense check of where the industry is at in terms of what information brands are disclosing. We know what transparency is. I don't need to go into that.
Well, please do.
Yeah, well, I mean, Maria Teresa began this call around, the difference between transparency and sustainability. So just to kind of be clear about that. So transparency is the public disclosure of information that enables people to hold decision makers to account. For the fashion industry, this means sharing information about their supply chains, business practices, impacts of these practices on workers, communities, and the environment. This is a quote by Paul Rowland, a friend at Clean Clothes Campaign. But transparency is really important and matters because Transparency at supply chain and wage levels is crucial for workers, trade unions, and civil society to hold companies accountable for their business practices. So just as an example, although transparency alone, of course, couldn't have prevented the Rana Plaza tragedy, if there was visibility into where, for these brands of where their clothes are being produced, they could have, audited those facilities. They could have been made aware of issues and remediated them before they ended in tragedy. So transparency is a really important illuminating force, which is why we have focused on this for a fashion transparency index, because part of our theory of change is that transparency leads to scrutiny, which leads to accountability, which leads to change. So without information in the public domain, the civil society is not able to pressure brands to scrutinize brands and, really push them to do and just be better. And, it really is the first step in this journey for systemic change. So now we'll get into a bit of the methodology and scope of research. So as I mentioned before, there's a very clear difference between transparency and sustainability, but just to reiterate again, I want to take a moment to say what we measure and don't measure. So we are purely measuring the level of information disclosed by brands, just checking what information is there across our key areas of policies and commitments, governance, traceability, human rights and environmental due diligence, as well as our spotlight issue section, which we change every year, but includes important issues like living wages, purchasing practices, water and chemicals, and overconsumption. But as such, we are looking for evidence of this information that is in the public domain and easily surfaceable. We are not making a comment or verifying the sustainability of these claims, because again, just falling back on our theory of change, it is important for this information to be publicly available so that we can scrutinize it and ultimately pressurize them to make changes that reduce their social and environmental impacts. And we only credit and award information that is publicly disclosed or on the brand's website or on the parent company website, so as long as they're linked. And again, this is because it needs to be publicly available and transparent and shared, and it's easily accessible. So we don't count information that is not available to the public. So, sometimes brands are like, we have this internal system and we don't disclose it, but we always go back and say, well, we strongly encourage you to disclose this information because it's part of this picture of the universe of information that should be out there that allows you to be held accountable should something go wrong and there's issues in your supply chain that need to be remediated. So moving on, just to give a summary of our research process. It's all year long, and currently at the moment we're finalizing our research for the FTI 2022. So it was an incredibly busy time, and my brain is absolute mush right now. So bear with. But we begin our FTI research process by meeting with our consultation committee. So our consultation committee helps us ensure that our methodology is robust and progressive in what we're asking of brands. So we speak with the likes of trade unions, Fair Trade Foundation, Tradecraft, Environmental Rights Bureau, Changing Markets, and so on. So we speak with them to converge and align with existing industry standards and frameworks so that we reduce report reading fatigue and drive standardization. And I know I'm speaking so much, so I'm gonna try to be quick, but just to say with our research process, it has a 4-eyed review. So we review the questionnaires multiple times across different team members to ensure that we are aligned, that there's no human error in our the work that we're doing, and we just want to make sure we're publishing the most accurate information that we can. So I just wanted to quickly highlight some of the main findings from the FTI this year. Of course, we had 47% of brands disclosing their first-tier manufacturer lists. 2017 was when the first index was published, and at the time we were only assessing 100 brands, and 32 out of 100 brands were disclosing the first-tier manufacturer lists. But now 47% of 250 are, and that's just really encouraging to see, because we used to view traceability and transparency as a pipe dream many years ago, and to have luxury brands disclosing for the first time last year, it really is it exemplifies like a sea change happening in the industry. You know, before, luxury brands used to say we hide behind trade secrets and commercial sensitivities, but we see that slowly changing. So I'm really looking forward to the results of the FDI 2022, and I really hope that we can move from 47% disclosure to 50% disclosure, and of course beyond, considering yeah, there's a lack of visibility on the processing facilities and raw materials, but you know, any bit of progress is commendable. Sorry, was someone trying to say something?
Well, no, I was just trying to say that, you know, as all the index, you know, and the rating that someone is trying to do to help, you know, communicating transparency and traceability is one of the most difficult work, you know, because the market positioning is so different, the kind of way to do business is so different. So I think you are doing a great work, but at the same time, we know it's really, you know, critical because sometimes we are comparing things that are completely different, but we need to do something. So, so I fully understand the difficulty behind it. And maybe it's not the perfection, but the perfection is not about this world. And we need to make trials to make things as much as possible going into some direction. And I think that's what Transparency Index is doing. So that was my personal comment to this, but it's a huge work.
Yes, it absolutely is. I mean, just with FTI alone, like we've had different stakeholders approach us. Like, I mean, of course, brands have said, you know, this acts as a to-do list for them as an industry to help sensitize them to their blind spots, and that's so encouraging to hear. But you know, we see different stakeholders using our data. Like increasingly, investors are using it to manage their portfolios, and you know, they consider like maybe we will stop financing this brand because they're not meeting certain targets across their environmental, social, and governance KPIs and such. So I guess just because I'm aware we're running out of time, I'll just quickly go into.
Don't worry.
I can go into the future of the Transparency Index just because I think that'll be interesting. So, as I mentioned, you know, we're really trying to understand how people, how different stakeholders are using our data. So, as I mentioned, investors are using it increasingly. So like some things that we're working on now is like, you know, we're meeting with investors, trying to really understand for what purpose they're using it. So that's something we want to consider in the future because we really want to make our data work harder. And what I mean by that is, you know, the FTI comes out once a year and we do reference it all year round, but we want to think of a way that it's constantly kind of like top of mind, and we want to repurpose it and use it in other ways, like maybe delving deeper into certain issues and publishing other reports. So I think it's interesting to think about the future of the FTI. One thing that I'm so keen to do, but we just haven't kind of found the right partner for this yet. And it's also a funding issue. Working operating as an NGO is so hard, as I'm sure many of you on this call know. But one thing that we're very keen to do is to create interactive data visualizations. So people can really go dive into the data and play with it. And, you know, some people learn differently. So I think having this opportunity, it would increase the uptake of our data and make it more accessible for people who might have different learning styles or reasons for using our data. So that's really top of mind. But ultimately, there really shouldn't be a need for a transparency index. It would be great to reach a point where the average score in the index is like 70, 80, 90%, and then there's no reason for it. But we're obviously not there yet, considering the average score in the index is 23%. But hopefully that's going to change. I mean, there's a lot of different things happening in the industry. You know, there's the consumer pressure because they're interested in sustainability, but, you know, there's the legislative pressures that are coming. So hopefully everything taken into consideration and bringing it back to our theory of change is like, there's all different levers that need to be pulled at once, and it's industry change, cultural change, and policy change. And they all need to be working harmoniously to really help us achieve that better fashion industry that we are campaigning for. And yeah, here's a bit of information on how you can get involved. I can copy and paste it into the chat.
That's fantastic, yeah.
And yeah, sorry, I took up so much time. It's so hard to talk about all of this in a concise way, but yeah, thank you for the chance to platform our work.
Thank you, Liv. I know it's a big challenge, you know, to condensate everything in 9-10 minutes, but we know that, you know, we cannot take more than 40 minutes of the concentration of the people and the time, you know, because the rhythm of everybody life and business and calls is huge. But I'm really personally honored to have had this session with all of you. So much, you know, to go deep inside, you know, and we hope that we have been a teaser about how many tools you have to play and how many facilitation you can get, you know, for what is happening. And many of these women, I have to underline, even if it's open to all the people in the world. And again, maybe it's not perfect because perfection is not about this word, but I think so much more since, you know, in the last 10 years. And of course, you know, before entering in any conversation about products, you know, and fibers, you know, the sustainable, you know, part of the production is so important to get our hands on the transparency of the supply chain, because that's where 90% of, let's say, the heavy part of issues are coming. We have upstream partners that are acting so well in many cases, and different ways to look at transparency as well. That's why sometimes we have these, you know, average of on transparency index that are so low because they have another idea of how to disclose certain things. So we need to overcome a lot of challenges, but I think that all together we can do so. Now, as we are running out of time, I will ask if there are some questions. Absolutely. Maybe we can answer one or two, and then we will take the responsibility to address it to the speakers in order to have, if you give us the email address, we can also come back to you. Please go ahead, Camilla.
Yeah, Sebastian is asking, do you have an experience in blockchain tracing in supply chains to increase transparency and traceability? If so, what was the challenges implementing such a system throughout the supply chain? And I saw Maria Teresa wanted to reply.
Yes, Giusy, if I may reply to Sebastian, actually it's more than a year we are running pilots with a blockchain system that UNECE has developed with support of Swiss University. So we do have a blockchain system in place, and with this blockchain system we are running pilots for the cotton and the leather value chains. To start with, we have 60 industry partners. We have brands like Vivienne Westwood, like Salvatore Ferragamo. We have manufacturers, to mention one, we have Albini. For the leather, we have Richard Hoffman, for instance, as a manufacturer. But we go up to cover also the production of raw material. So the actual farmers in countries like Peru, Brazil, Uzbekistan, Egypt, India. So it's a very interesting experience we have gained with these blockchain pilots because we could really work with industry to implement the traceability system and approach we have developed in a blockchain environment. I can tell you that the big challenge we have experienced is not that much related to the use of the technology, because in the end, you know, once the blockchain platform is developed, it's pretty easy and user-friendly in terms of use. So the technology the technology layer is not really the challenge. The challenge comes to the mapping of the value chain, because we have seen with the downstream actors, the brands and the retailers, for instance, that they didn't have really a clear overview of who their suppliers were, and it took some time actually to build full visibility of the value chain for the use case that we have developed, especially when there were traders in between the manufacturing and the raw material production stage. So that mapping of the value chain, the data collection according to the standardized let's say, approach we have provided. The data is there, but needs to be standardized in order to make it understandable to all parties and in the system. And the other issue was the data privacy and security. Not all actors that were, connected in the blockchain system were so ready actually to share and disclose data and information that are considered to be sensitive ones. So we had to come up with a data management framework with the support of a lawyer. So the legal aspect related to intellectual property rights and data privacy and security is certainly a challenge. So I would say value chain mapping, data collection in a standardized way, and data privacy and security more than the technology, the component in itself. But happy to tell you more, as we are going to publish soon a proof of concept that is going to provide a detailed description of the 20 use cases we developed with these 60 partners in 23 different countries. And the blockchain pilots are still ongoing. So if there is an interest to join, we are happy to, explore opportunities to collaborate. As I said, cotton and leather for the time being, UNIC and ICEC are part, for instance, of the work we are doing on the leather blockchain, but we are going to cover also wool and cashmere, and we'll see also synthetic in the coming year and a half.
This is a very important argument and subject that I think, we are having quite every year. We dedicate one session directly to the blockchain because there are so many arguments linked to it. Transparency is one, but we have many others. I think we will, this year, class will have one of them. And maybe Maria Teresa, we are going to ask you to come specifically for this because we need to dedicate time, I think.
I can actually have the university and let's say one of the experts in my team that is a technical expert on blockchain to make that presentation because it's important to go to the business and technology model more in detail. So happy to have my experts.
Absolutely, because we will have expert for fibers, for example, expert for garments. So, but it's going to be a session itself because it's a big.
Yes, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
even in an hour, again, it is going to be difficult, but at least we will have more inputs, for this such an important argument.
Then James is asking, how are you coping with the massive fraud in the certification of Indian organic cotton?
Yeah.
Well, we would like to be able, to find solution. Of course, we talk about it. We amplify the message about, this kind of danger, and we know how to, make different choices, but I think it's part, the answer is also part of a law introduction, something that is, above us, I believe. But for sure, thanks for raising out because we have, unfortunately, many examples of this. But, with these kind of tools that we have been talking today, maybe there is the possibility to do more conscious choices. Because what I really like about, the Fashion Revolution Week is this campaign about who made my clothes, because we need to keep the, asking this question in our everyday life, every moment, when we buy a fabric, when we buy a garment, when we decide for a partner, it's important to know everything about them in order not to support these terrible tragedy examples. So I don't know if you want to add something more, Kerry, Liv, Maria Teresa, Fulvia, more than that. But I think these kind of things are going over our possibilities, I believe.
There is another question. Do you think it's good thing that sustainable textile companies are now working or collabing with fast fashion brands? It could be a step towards better practices, or it is just greenwashing?
Well, what I can say, from my perspective is that if the cooperation is opening new doors to concrete change toward the good, for me, it's good, because we need to change this system. I cannot say if it's good or not good because I need to know what's going on. We need to know the exercise and all the information around it, I keep saying that one of the first initiator of this sustainable revolution has been fast fashion, by the way. So, it's not all bad and all good. We need to understand and know the information in order to evaluate them. So that's my position.
Liv wants to add something. I think I saw.
Yeah. Sorry, I just just to add to that. I think it is a good thing that they are working with these brands to collaborate, but I think overarchingly we need to reduce the barriers to actually using more sustainable materials, because of course the synthetic materials and so on are significantly cheaper, which means they're going to keep using them. So I think polyester or synthetic material usage is going to increase to 70% of all clothing, or maybe it was even 90% by 2030, and it's shocking and scary. So we need to reduce the barriers to using these more sustainable materials. We need to reduce the premiums, the costs of everything, and just make it easier for these brands to actually use these materials. It shouldn't be that using a sustainable material is like this amazing initiative that is deserving of all this attention. It should just be part and parcel of how they operate. It shouldn't be like, oh, here's a capsule collection. Like, what's going on with the stuff that's not in the capsule collection? So like just moving beyond like fashion and unsustainable, or fashion and sustainable fashion, like fashion part and parcel should be sustainable, and we should be really speaking about unsustainable fashion. So yeah, that was my rant. But yeah, I agree that it's good they're working together, but systematically there needs to be something in place that reduces the cost of using more environmentally friendly materials.
Now there was just a sharing, let's say. Araceli was sharing an article about a Chinese study about recycled polyester that exposes how it might not be as sustainable as we think.
Yes.
This was a sharing in the chat.
Yeah.
Well, again, we cannot accept generic, quotes about an evaluation. We need to understand what we have in front of us. With transparency, that's what it's needed, where it's coming, where, who has made it, how it has been made, and which is, the impact that it creates, even if it's recycled. So.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, to this, I just wanted to add, I've been in Chile like 10 days ago, and some of you may have read or listened to this investigation made by the BBC on the textile waste in the Atacama Desert. And there we were discussing with local actors that are on the issue. The Atacama Desert has become basically the major textile dump of the world, where most of the textile waste is ending, and this has been just exploding as a result of the fast fashion. I mean, over the last 20 years. So fast fashion and the textile waste is a huge issue. So sustainable materials, can be part of not the solution. I think waste reduction and reduction of consumption and consuming better quality, products can last longer and can be reused and recycled better is absolutely.
So, sorry, I think these are all valuable arguments, but that needs a little bit more time to explore. So I think we need to close here, but this does not mean that we are not going to handle this argument, because we will have smart voices every month. And so we will be in touch also, to have inputs. And thanks for the people that has been with us for the last hour, that didn't leave us for a single moment. Thanks to Kerry, to Liv, to Fulvia, for all your inputs here, because, it's just together with the expertise, the competence, and the authentic passion and commitment, because I could hear not just what you do, but how you do things. So thanks again, and thanks also to the team of C.L.A.S.S that supported this new challenge. Thank you, and keep in touch with everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Giusy. Thank you, Camilla. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.